Today we will go a bit deeper into where we were last class. So we will go over the brushes a bit deeper, we'll go into files a little bit deeper, and we will also learn how to bake in a very, very basic introduction way, just so we can continue with the other features that demand baking. We will also make a preset, and if time will allow, we will also work a little bit together on some model. So let's start new scene. So I will go to the new. You have on the drive lesson 4. If you, all the files that I will go through today and more, you can find them in lesson 4. So I'm going to lesson 4, and I will bring the object bed UVs because we will troubleshoot some things. Okay, so this is my this is my scene. So let's start with isolate only the plane. So I select the plane and I'm focusing it. You can also do it one by one. Okay, so this is my UVs, as you remember, and this is my 3D place. So this is the 3D and the 2D, and you can see that the UVs are a bit weird. Okay, so let's go into brushes. Let's create a brush layer. We already have one, so we don't need to create it. Okay, so last time we were talking about the brushes, and we just mentioned quite briefly that we can change the size and the minimum size, the flow, which is, you can see in the preview, it's basically the opacity. And you have the stroke opacity, the scattering, and we can even have some randomize properties. So we can randomize all of those, the flow, the angle, and the position. So this we all know. Now we kind of skipped this area, and we'll go not fully, but we'll make it practical. So here is what alignment can we use with brushes. And for this, actually, let me just go to the, I will go to the cylinder. Okay, so we have few options of alignment, and this is the alignment, how the brush is aligning with the model. So right now we are on the default, which is wrap, and it's always following the typology of the model. You can see it's twisting, and when it's loose it just goes flat. Okay, and let me just select this layer so we will also get the UVs. Okay, so now if we paint with this brush, let's paint it. Let me select color. So if we are painting here, you can see that if I paint in the edges, okay, let me just reset the brush. It's got too funky for now. Okay, so you see if I paint the edges, you can see that the edge which is here and here, they are sharing the same edge. I get painting on both of them, because in this way we can make a very nice seamless work without playing too much with the UVs. Now even if I will paint on the UVs, and you can see my brush is jumping according to the size, so even if I will paint on the UVs here and I will not touch this area down here, you still see I'm getting the brush here, because it's always trying to be seamless. But this is the default brush, and most of the time this is the most useful way that I would say to work. Okay, let's go to the next one. The next one is camera, and you would see that my circle now, my brush, is always facing on the way to the camera. So if I will paint here, you can see it's painting totally different, because it's trying to keep the angle of the camera. Okay, so this is the second one, and then we have the UV. And the UV, you can see immediately the difference. Let me just go to this one. If I would paint in the edge here, which is this edge, I will not get the other edge. And this is in some cases that you just don't want to have the options to touch the other UVs, just whatever you paint. You can also do it here. You can see if I paint in the 3D world, until I would go 90 degrees, I will not get the top. So these are the positions that we can use. Now, let's keep it on default because this is quite good. Okay. Now the other thing we have is the size of the brush, and you can see that when I zoom, my brush is always keeping proportion with the model. So if I'm far away, the brush will be small, and if I'm close, the brush would be much bigger. Now, sometimes some people prefer to work in a different way, which is the viewport, which means that the brush always keep the same size. It just, if I want smaller, I just need to zoom in and I get small brush. And if I go back, then I get big brush. So if you're more comfortable working in a 3D perspective, it can be a very useful way to work. Now the other way is according to the texture. And let me see if you probably can see it better on the cube. So you can see from the UVs of the cubes that all the sides are the same way, the same size, but the UVs are not the same. And so let's paint here just to see. This is a small size, this is big size. So you can see now the brush here is very big and the brush here is very small. So this is in proportion to your UVs. Now it has different uses, but for the moment you just need to know it's there. Okay, the second thing we can do with a brush is we can add alpha to the brush. Let's go to our tab to our shelf, and this is the alpha place. So for the moment we have just a soften edges alpha, which we can adjust a little bit. We can make it harder, all the way to just a circle, or we can make it a bit softer. This is a very basic alpha. This is the default, but we can plug in whatever we want, basically, and now just paint with this. Let me just shrink the size, and I will go back to viewport. So now we can paint this shape. Of course, we don't get anything because our spacing is non-existent, but we can scale it up, maybe add some other layer, and now we can paint this. So we can create very interesting brushes. We can also do it a bit more, we can jitter things a bit higher. And maybe it's not the best alpha, but I think you can get the point what you can achieve with this plugging alphas. So we can plug the alpha right here, and sometimes we have more options, so it's a little bit different, and we can play around. Now we will not go through all the alphas. This is something you can do, this is part of the fun of discovering a program, but you know that you can plug it here. Now the other thing that we have, let's go back to the plane. Now if you lose your model, you can always press F and you will kind of get it in the view. Okay, so another thing we have is stencil, and the closest way to describe it is probably, it's like spray painting in the street. So you take some kind of a shape. Let's take whatever shape. Let's put it inside of the stencil, and you see now we get kind of an alpha in front of us. Now we cannot move this. We can move this alpha, but we can also just align our plane as we want. But then we can also play with the stencil. So the shortcut is S the letter S with the mouse buttons. So if I press S plus the mouse, the right button, I can make it bigger and smaller. If I press the middle, I can move it around, and if I will press the left, I can rotate it. Now I can, of course, do all of those things from the 3D preview, but sometimes it's more comfortable to do it this way. Okay, so we put the alpha, the stencil, which is an alpha plug to the stencil, and now we can basically paint it, but let's go back to some reasonable brush. So now we can start and paint it, and you can see we get this kind of alpha, and we can use it later on for whatever we need. Obviously you can create your own stencils and your own alphas, and this is a nice way to bring some design and to use it in a seamless way. So this was the stencil. Now sometimes the stencil has some attribute, and this depends on the alpha that you chose. So you can be quite creative with this. Okay, so let's see how we can create a brush. So I will just unplug the stencil, and let's see if the alpha, it's a weird one. Okay, that's the classic one. Okay, so I reset it with Basic Soft. Double click, give me the brush. And I get all the settings that are pre-made. Now all of those brushes are kind of already pre-made, and I would suggest to go through them. They are very interesting, and you can create, it's already most of it made quite nicely. For example, this stitching that can be later on adjust, you can give it more spacing or opacity. But okay, let's go back to the soft basic. Okay, so this is our brush right now, and you can see this this red icon. It shows you the properties of the brush. So it has 0 metallic versus 100 metallic. This is the roughness. Let's skip the normal for the moment, and then you have the height, which is, you cannot see it happening, but when you paint, you do see it. So we can know what to expect when we look at this this thumbnail. What we can also do is, instead of creating our own setup, we can come to the materials and use one of the materials as a brush. So let's just select this one, double click, so now it becomes the brush. I will just add paint layer, and you can see we can paint with this kind of material. Let's select something. Select something else, double click, and we can paint with metal, for example, or we can paint plastic. It's not so visible without the light. Now again, we can adjust some of the settings, and we can also go to the brush settings and scale it, and maybe give some more spacing. Okay, that's too much spacing. But the point is quite clear. You can paint with the materials that are ready-made for us. Now, smart materials, just to remind you, it's something totally different. So don't try to paint with those. But with material, you can definitely paint. Another way to create a brush, I will go to the brushes and go back to my Basic Soft. excuse me. Okay, now I needed to unplug everything. Now, when we paint with brush, you can also, instead of just selecting attribute, you can also put mask inside. So, let's say we will have metallic, and for the roughness, we'll put some, let's try some grunge. Okay, so now we kind of created our own brush. It has a little bit different values. Okay, so we can create our brushes and plug, we can even plug something different for the metallic. So we get different metallic map and different roughness map. And let me just show you the channels. So this is our color channel, this is our metallic channel, and this is our roughness channel. So this was about the brushes. Okay, so now let's go into textures, texture files, which is our fill layer, basically. So let me just go and maybe we can select some other shape. Okay, maybe we can start with the cube. Okay, so we have the cube, and also making sure I select the cube and I'm not on something else. Okay, so I'm back into the layers and I don't have any layers, so let's start with fill layer. And we saw last time we can give it a general color and all the other properties of PBR, which is metallic, roughness. We will skip the normals for the moment. Okay, but then we said we can also manipulate it with some mask and some file. So let's put some black mask and let's add fill. Okay, so now it's just gray, so we see half nut. Okay, so now let's go and let's find some procedurals. Let's find some checker. I will put the checker here. Okay, so you put the checker. You don't see anything because our settings are off. But let's go through all the settings that we have. So the first line that we have, it says projection, and this is how the texture file would be projected on the model. Okay, so now it's UV projection, which means the file is just sit here. This checker is exactly here. That's why you see red here and red here, because this and this are black and this are white, because we have only four cubes. Now we can enlarge the scale, which in some programs is called tiling, which means how many times we want the same texture. Okay, we can change the rotation, and we can even offset it, so it starts and ends exactly where we want. So this is our control for the UV projection. So it means this projection, it's really depend on how you made the UVs. So you can see in my case, the square here are too big, and the square here are swoosh, and here it's kind of look okay in those sides. Obviously in this case it will not be a good solution, so we have more options. And the next option that we have is triplanar. Now I want you to look at the main screen, the 3D space, and you can see the triplanar basically create kind of a box around it and project the checkers from all the sides equally. So we can see, we can see that the sizes are equal, everything is the same because it was projected from 4 directions. Okay, now here we have a little bit of different setting. You see that the offset disappeared. We still have the scale and we still have the rotation, but we kind of lost the offset. But we gain a whole new window, which is 3D projection settings. Now this is a little bit something that's worth paying attention, because we have two kinds of projecting maps, and two kinds of controlling the projection. One kind is from the UV space. So let me go back to this screen. So one time is relate to the UV space, and one kind is relate to the 3D space. So you can see if I scale it here, I can scale it right here, but I can also scale it in the 3D projection. I just have more options. I can scale it to different directions. The same with the rotation. I can rotate it here, or I can rotate it in a different axis around the 3D space. Now, up here on top you have the tools to control it. The default is the move tool, so you can move it around. Then you have the rotation, and you can see right here when you rotate in a 3D space, you have correlation number with the rotation you made, so you can always be accurate if you need to be accurate. And the same with the scale, so we can scale it on different directions, or from the middle we can scale it all together. Okay, so let me just reset it again. No, that's not what I meant. Okay, so we are still in the triplanar, and I would just try to explain a bit better the differences, and try to see the difference, what happened when I'm rotating and scaling and moving, what happens in the 3D space and what happened in the 2D space. So let's start with rotation on the 2D space. So if I rotate on the 2D space, you can see that it's like I put the texture above the 2D space and rotated it. So the rotation is, that's not what I wanted. But now see what happens if I rotate on the 3D space. Now you can see everything is rotating in a different place. If you look at the UV, the 2D space, you can see it's a totally different rotation. See, this rotation is totally different than if I will just rotate on the 2D space. Okay, I hope it's clear enough. I guess we will get to it when we will work a bit deeper, but I just wanted to go through those differences. Now, let me show one. Okay, so let's see what happens, what more options do we have. So I will delete this one. And let's go to, maybe we'll select now okay, let's select the sphere. Okay, so I have the sphere. I will isolate it again just to make it easier. I will need to create. Okay, now I'll just plug it directly to the color base, just to save some time of setup. So you see, based on the UVs, it comes quite nice. This is based on the UVs. In case we don't have, or actually, let's do some scaling, and we'll see it's actually is not really. I mean, it could be good, depends for what purpose. Let's try it with triplanar. So with triplanar we have an issue because this shape is a circle and we try to project a square. And we have this thing that happens here, which is trying to blend things together. And this is the hardness. So you can blend more or less. And just for the sake of demonstration, we can plug something which is a bit less squarey, and you can see it does quite a good job. So let's. So if this is our UV, it looks fine. But then we have the triplanar, and you can see that if I play with the hardness, if it's totally hard, you can see where the seams where the UVs are being, not the UVs, sorry, the seams of the planes. So one plane, it's here, and it's made out of 6 planes. But that's why we have this option of hardness, and we can slowly blend it together. And first glance, it will look quite okay. So sometimes it's a very good option when our UVs are not very great. And this is in general, and I would like to show you also. In this class, you would see that I have models with not good UVs, and Substance still can handle it, still can compensate. Now we have something even better than triplanar, which is spherical. And it looks a bit weird because it's not positioned. So I would go to the Move tool, and if I would position it right in the center of the object, you could see that we get quite nice projection without any seams. So if you are lucky enough and your model is a sphere, that's a good option. And of course we can do all the other things, which is to rotate and to scale. Although scaling seems not to do much. So if you want to really scale it, we'll have to play with the repetition. Okay, so these are our options when we project files. And this is relevant to everything that it's being contained under a fill layer. So it can be directly on the fill layer, or it can be with a mask and then fill. So we always have this either grayscale, or we have all the 5 channels that we are using. Okay, so baking, I will just repeat it very quickly. We are basically, we have high poly models of all of those. I don't have image to show you, but actually what I can do is I will just quickly bring the high poly. Okay, so this is our high polygons. This is what we are baking from this. So we would like to transfer all this data as accurate as possible to the low poly model, which we cannot add more details in the topology, but we can add it in a map, it's called normal map, and we'll try to bake it, and we'll also see some other map that we can bake. So try to remember this image, or do a print screen, or I can actually do. Okay, so I will bring back my low poly. Okay, so you see the difference. It's kind of different. Okay, so how do we bake? First, we go to the texture set settings. Now let's expand it just a little bit so we can see what's going on. And we would like to bake those maps. Okay, this is our channels, this is our PBR channels, and this is our maps. And this is the preview that we see right now, which is quite low, but we'll make it better. So let's go to bake mesh maps. Okay, so we get this window, and it has a lot of parameters, and for the moment, the only thing we will do is bake the normal. So I will just uncheck all the others. I would put it on 4K. Let's see how much it will take. So this is our the size that we are baking. This is the size of the textures. And let's anti-aliasing I would put on 4, but let's just leave it on default. And now we just need to add, you can see we have this warning sign, which tells us something is missing, and what is missing? It's actually, we are missing the high poly model to bake from. So let's open, and it goes directly to my folder, but you will need to find where you saved the models. And let's select the high, and now we have two options. We can either bake the layer, the texture set up here, P cube, that is selected. Okay, so we can either bake only this one, or we can bake several. So let's bake all of them. Let's bake selected textures. Hope it will be fast. Maybe I will need to stop it and start again. Okay, so the reason I baked only the normals is that baking takes quite a long time. So I like to bake first the normals, then I get all the problems that can arise, like wrong naming, model is not good, bad export, and so on. So I have quite quick render, quite quick bake, and I get all the mistakes. And you can see, if you remember the high poly, you can see that substance is limited. We didn't get everything. We kind of got very nice softened edges that we didn't have, and also here we got these slices quite nicely, but not as deep as it will look on the high poly. The cylinder totally didn't transfer properly, and you can see the plane here was somehow sliced in the middle. So yeah, we need to know substance has its limitation, because everything here is fake. We didn't add any new detail to the mesh. It's just it's a manipulation of the light plus the normal map together that give us this illusion. And you can see this illusion works the best when you are in front of things, much more than if you are on the side. So this plane kind of lose the illusion when we go on the side. The same with the cylinder. It looks way better from the top, but we'll immediately discover that it's fake when we look from the side. But this is good fake for the game world, and also it's a good way to add details even when you render. Small details that are very demanding from poly count. Now let's see if we can fix one of those issues. So we see that our plane is not baked very well, and the reason our plane is not baked very well, it's the way that baking is working. And I will try to put now a video that will demonstrate it. Let's see if I can. So. Do you see the video? I hope you see the video. So you see we have the high poly, then we have the low poly, which is just a plane, and then we create some kind of box around it, and only the things that will be inside of the box would actually bake. So this is the box that we create around it. And the default of substance kind of giving us this baking. That's why it's sliced. Everything here was outside of our box, and we need to enlarge the box to go around it. Now the box has in and back face and front face. So the front would be here, the back would be, you cannot see it because it's transparent, but it will be on the back. Of course, plane is the easiest shape, but the cube is the same. It will just create a cube around the cube and inside of the cube. And everything in this area would go to be baked. Now, just quick question, if everybody saw the video, managed to see it? Or somebody managed to see it? Okay, great. Great. Okay, so let's try to fix it as much as we can. And I will now go only on the plane, just to save some time. And I will go back to the baking. And I'm still working only on normals. I would still keep the high resolution, and this is my high source. Now you can see here we have maximum frontal distance, maximum rear distance, and this is exactly these planes that I was saying that. So let's try to, we can increase it. I mean, this is trial and error, I would say, but I will try half. Sometimes it's worth baking a few times till you get to the right amount. And now I'll bake only the plane. I don't want to bake all the rest. Okay, so you see, we got the details that we are missing, obviously. But we also got some other weird artifacts. And this is because we made our bounding box went all the way to the sphere and to the cylinder and to the cube. So we actually got them as part of the baking. So it means that we went a little bit too far. Now there are two ways to fix it. We will now do just the one way, which is we'll just go back to 1. I guess it's enough. And let's bake only the plane. Okay, so now we have quite nice bake, especially if we look from the front. Now let's try to do it for the cylinder and the sphere. So let's go to the cylinder. I will go to the bake window. And now we can either do bake everything, but because we want to save time, we can go and decide what we want to bake. So we go to the selection. And then we will say, okay, let's not bake the cube, and let's not bake the plane, and also the solid. So we are now doing the cylinder and the sphere. Let's bake them with the same setting. Okay, so we can see, especially if you look on top from top view, you can see that the sphere looks nicer. The cylinder looks nicer. It could fool people, but not really. This is a bit too much to push the baking limits. The ball looks nice. It didn't improve anything. Again, probably this is the limit that the program can fake. So yeah, we need to remember we have some limitations. Sometimes we'll have to add geometry, even just a little bit, to get some things to appear. Okay, so this was our baking, or let's say the normal baking. Now we have more things that we can bake. That will take quite long, but let's do it. I will put it now on 2K. And if you don't have a very strong computer and you want to follow it, you can put it even less. Now let's go with the last 4. Ambient occlusion, curvature, position, and thickness. And we will skip the ID for the moment. Okay, I will go back to my selection and just make sure everything is selected. Back to common, and let's bake selected textures. Now if it would take way too long, I would probably stop it and just bake maybe just one. Okay, so there is a little difference which we got the ambient occlusion, and basically let's go through what we bake. Okay, so this is our ambient occlusion, which it goes into cavities and makes them a little bit darker according to how deep they are or how they close to something else. So whenever two objects intersect, we will have ambient occlusion. That's why we can see we have ambient occlusion here, because this is the inner part of the ribs, I guess. And here we have almost nothing, because nothing is, we have a little bit gray here that comes from being close to this object. This is our ambient occlusion. Then we have the curvature. The curvature is the edges, to put it simply. It's the edges are in white, and the cavities are in black, and everything else is gray. Okay, so this is trying to track the curvature of the model. You can see the most elaborate part is the plane, because it has more curvature into it. Then we got the position, which is not very clear map, but it just tells us where is X and Y and Z. So we can know if our object is facing up or down or to the side. It's being used for different generators. And then we have the thickness. And the thickness is, as it sounds, it's how thick it is. It just gives us what is thicker than the other. In this case, it's not really, okay, maybe in the plane it will be interesting. And then we have the normal that we already saw before. Okay, so this is the maps that we got. Now, quick note on baking, and we will repeat it again a bit deeper, I guess. When you bake, so let's go to the window. When you bake, try to bake as not crazy numbers. It needs to make sense, because every texture set comes with 6 to 7 maps, and those maps are quite heavy, and you can end up with files in size of 4 to 8 gigabytes. So if you are making a character, you don't need to bake the eyes 4K. You can bake them 500 or so. That's it. This is just to keep the project neat and clean. Now I also noticed that I forgot to bake the world space normal. So I will just quickly go into it and just bake it again. Okay, so now we have it. Now just if you want to see it yourself, I'm reminding you, see, showing us something we will not see now, which is our working layers, not layers, the PBR layers. Okay, so but if you press B, then you can get the baking textures. So we have the world space, ID, which we didn't bake, ambient occlusion, and so forth. So B, and then M to just go back to the material, and we can get all of those options here if you don't remember the shortcut. Okay, so let's see what we can actually do with those maps. Let's isolate the solid. Let's work on it a little bit. So let's create a new layer, a new fill layer, excuse me, and this will be our base. So here we will have no mask. We will not use the normals, and we'll not use the height. Oh, let's give it some color. Make it metallic. Okay, so we have our base material. Of course, it looks too basic. It's not very interesting and doesn't look very realistic. So let's go and create another layer. And here, let's try to fake that the edge were a little bit more used. So I would just get rid of the normals, the height, and the metallic, because I will keep it the same. Just have the roughness and the color. And I will start with a mask before I select any other colors. So I can do either black mask and generator, or if this is the first thing we do, we can do directly black. Sorry, just my bad. So black mask and then generator. Okay, so we got a generator. Nothing happens because we didn't select our generator. So let's select one. Let's see the edge. I will just write edge. And you can see from the preview, this is worn edges. So I'll just click this one. And you can see immediately we got all these worn edges and where we would expect to have them. And the reason we get it, it's because we have all this map that we just baked. And you can see what Substance is doing. It's trying to discover the position, the curvature, and the ambient occlusion. And according to this, it's creating, it's understanding the edge. Now, if we'll go back to our, it's up here, our generator, you can see that we have some values that we can play with. And it's quite self-explanatory. We can have still some kind of control. Okay, now let's go back to the color, and right now it's just gray. It's nothing under, and I would like to maybe make it screen. It's a little bit blending it, I think, a little bit better. And maybe the color can be, I will actually sample color from here, make it a bit brighter. Okay, actually, thinking back, I kind of like the white. Okay, and we can also play with the roughness. So let's say the edges should be a bit less rough. Okay, of course we can continue to add this mask, or we can add another mask. But I think for this shape, let's leave it in this way. And I will select these two layers and I will group them together. So we have the folder icon or Ctrl-G. Okay, so this is one material that we created. Ah, sorry, I need to drop them into the group. Okay, so the easy way would be just to select these two and Ctrl-G. And this is what we'll do. Okay, so I have one material right here. Now I'll hide this material. And let's create some other material. Okay, so let's try to maybe to take something that it's, we'll start with something pre-made. Or actually, let's select another shape that give us also cavities. Okay, so I will go to my sphere. I will hide everything else. And let's start with pre-made texture. Actually, maybe not this one. Let's select something else. Okay, so this is kind of a wood. So you can see this is pre-made material, but it doesn't have much options. I mean, it has, you can kind of play around, get some nice wood as much as you like. We can also go to the projection and decide how to project it. So let's maybe try sphere. Might work nice. Okay, I think this is kind of like it. Maybe just to rotate so it goes up. Or actually not. Okay, this is good. You can do as you wish. Okay, so again we have the basic. This is our basic wood, and now let's make it a bit. We'll make the same thing we did before. So let's add some bright layer. Let's keep only the roughness and the color, and let's add black mask, and we can add a generator. I still have my selection, so I'll just take the edges and I will blend it a bit better. Not what I meant. Okay. Make it a little bit less. I'm now playing with the transparency, and I remind you, we play only with the color transparency. So it doesn't do any transparency with the roughness. Okay, so we have it a little bit worn out. Let's see if we want it to be more. It's probably will be more rough. Okay, so this is our edges. Okay. Now let's add some cavities. So again, I'm adding another fill layer. I will keep only the roughness and the color. This time I will multiply it because it needs to kind of darken everything. Add black mask, add generator. Now we'll take some other generator. Let's go with maybe dirt. Oops. Aha. So this is our dirt. This is the alpha. You can get the mask. Sorry, the mask. So you can come from here. And the default that it comes doesn't show very interesting result, so let's just play with it a bit. And you can see again the reason it works so nice and so fast, it's because we have the we bake the textures maps. So if for some reason something doesn't work, you might want to check if you bake the maps. Okay, so this is kind of, it's okay, I will stop here. And what I will do now, I will also Ctrl-G. Okay, so we have the solid is, we have metal, and then we have the wood. Very basic. Now another thing we can create is we can create smart material. So let me just name this one metal, and I will just quickly, I would select this metal, and I would do Ctrl C to select, to copy, or you can go, I don't know where it is, but Ctrl C works. So Ctrl C to copy. Then let's go back to the sphere, and let's just paste it here. And the reason I did it is because I just want to have both of those materials only on one object. Because what we'll do now, we will see how we can use, in I think the best way, ID map. So we kind of, when we baked everything, we skipped one map. Let's go back, and it's the ID map. So let's go to the ID map, and let's just bake just for the sphere. Oh. Okay, it didn't do what I expected to do. Why is that? Oh, yeah, okay, sorry. So this was my origin file, and the origin file was only high poly. It was not, didn't have ID map. So let me just take the ID map, and after we will bake, I will explain what I actually did to get it. Okay, so briefly you saw, let me just go to that. You saw briefly, what I did is in my 3D program, I just gave different material with only color value to those faces. So all the blue got, I selected all those faces that are here and just gave the material which have blue color. That's it. Now we can transfer it and to use it in Substance. Now in my case, I did special file for the ID, but you can also put it in the high poly. So when you export the high poly, you can actually paint the object there. But okay, let's see what we can do with the ID. So one of the common uses, let me just go back to material. One of the common uses is to use it as a mask. So let's decide, let's go with the metal, and let's give it black. And add mask with color selection. Okay, so nothing happens because we didn't feed any color. So let's go to the color selection. Let's go to pick color, and you can see I'm getting immediately this kind of map, the ID map, and I can select whatever color I want. And you can see that now we have very quickly, without a lot of using brush, we got two different materials. Now the other problem is that we have some problem here that we see the height from the wood. So it is nice, but let's see how we can get rid of it. So let's do the same with the wood. Let's go and let's skip one step, which is add black mask, and go directly to color selection. Okay, and let's select the color. Very important. And you can see now we have two different materials, and all we did is just select the color. So if you do your own models, this is maybe the good time for you to maybe paint them and kind of save yourself time later on. Now the most useful way I think to use it is actually when we do preset material, and I will show you why it's different. Because we could, I will just hide the color selection, and I will hide this one. We could basically paint it, everything. You know, we can go and add paint layer, and if I paint white, I'm getting the metal and wherever I want. But this is kind of demanding to be very accurate, but we have more options to paint. So this is our classic paint, and it's right up here, and you can see that we have a brush, but we have different way to paint, which is polygon fill. And I will just click the polygon fill, and you can see we got the menu right here. And we have triangles, which we don't have in this scene. We have squares, so if I'm on the paint layer, I can paint squares. So in this way, we could kind of paint the mask. It will take a little bit longer, but if we don't have ID map, we can still paint this way. And then we have object, so it's painting the whole object. And then we have according to the UVs, but we'll come back to those things later. For the moment, just you need to know that we have two options to paint. Okay, so now let me show you why we will not use this method in this case. It depends. If you do a lot of work, then you probably would like to use ID map. So I will take these two materials that are already made, and I will group them with Ctrl G. I will call it material 1. Just for me, you can call it, it's better to give a name that makes sense. And now, after we have this group, or any group, it doesn't have to be this one, we can go and create smart material. Okay, so we created smart material. It's right here. It's called material 1. Now we can use this material wherever we want. So let's go to some other shape. Let's maybe take the solid again, and I will hide this object. And now I will just bring the material that we created. And yeah, nothing comes. Why is that? I think I know. Okay, so let's go, and we are missing ID map for this object, of course, because we didn't bake. Let's bake it quickly. And you can see now that I have the ID map, I get exactly on the same colors. Let me just go back to the ID. So the same colors would correspond the same. So I created preset that I know later on whatever I do in my model blue would be metal, and whatever I would do yellow would be wood. So this is nice setup, and you don't need to count on your paint, because let's say if I will go with the paint, see, before we painted, we did the paint for here, you see it doesn't correspond with this object at all. So we kind of lost this paint, this specific work. So that's one way that that I see ID can really help. But more than this, it's not very I would say, didn't find it very useful. But then again, each one with his process. Okay, so the same process. New, we select model. Now you can see in lesson 4 you have a folder which is models. And here you have a lot of, not a lot, you know, some models that you can use later on at home. This is from our older project. So let's just choose one of them, so we can just play around a little bit more in the last little bit time that we have still left. Okay, so this is from unpublished snail game. So we have Mr. Dusty Trails. Okay, so let's do the whole process again. So this is quite simple. It has only one texture set, so we don't need to jump around. Let's start with baking, because we usually start with baking. This way we don't forget it and everything works. I will put it again on 4K. I will look for the corresponding file with extension with the suffix high. Now let me just unselect everything else, because we first tested the baking. Okay, bake selected. Let's bake it. Okay, everything baked. Let's see if it's actually baked nice. Now, you can see the level of the model here is very low because it was for a mobile game a few years back. So there is so much we can achieve with the baking. It's a little bit nicer than how it was. Okay, so let's start kind of giving it material. And this is what I would like you to do at home. You can choose this one or some other one. Now, for the moment, I would ask you not to use smart materials pre-made, because when you do work for industry, it makes sense. Now, if you want to learn, so I would say try maximum to go with materials, just to have some kind of a start. Okay, so I'm starting with some kind of a metal, and we'll do the same process like we did, because it's more or less what you will do when you work with this program. So we can start with the edges. So let's make them a bit more worn. And let's add generator. Let's see where the... Okay. So I'm looking at the mask and nothing is happening. And the reason is that I didn't do what I said that we have to do, which is to bake all the maps. So let's bake everything very quickly. I'll put it on 2K. Okay, now it will work. So now the generator works. It's just very, very weak. So let's see what we can do about it. Make it even more. Okay, this looks right. Now we will go to our properties. That makes it a bit more shiny in these places. Or maybe a bit more shiny. Let's go to the base and put it less. And again, this is you can do those settings according to how you feel or what material you want to achieve. But this is taking care of the edges. Let's also take care of the cavities. We'll leave roughness, and let's make it a bit darker. And we can deal with the specific color later on. So let's go with black mask. Generator. Now I didn't go with you over all the generators, but there are a lot of them, and you should just try and see what they do. I will select curvature maybe. No, not curvature. Was a mistake. I will select dirt, like we did before. And I will put the layer on multiply. Reminding you, multiply is darkening, and the screen, which I forgot to do in the other one, is more lightening. Now, the color is not so great. And let's do it almost totally rough. Now you can see it's starting to be there, but it's not, I think, for my opinion, it's a bit too aggressive. So let's maybe tone it down. And maybe more grunge and scale. Okay, so this is very quick quick work here. Now from this point what we can do is we can add another, let's say, fill layer, and let's add some more grunge so it goes all around our model. And I'll just randomly select something I'm not even sure it would exactly fit. Okay, so now we kind of, it looks nice, but we kind of lost all our cavity dirt. So let's just, what we need to do is we need to put it on screen. So now this is how it was, and now we are kind of adding some general dirt. Now on top of this we can always add paint layer, and we can start to paint out stuff that we don't like. So let's take some dirt brush, and I'm reminding you white is visible, black is not visible, so right now I'm on white. I will change it to black. And we can take out slowly things that we don't want. And then we can add another fill layer, excuse me, another paint. And this time it will be the opposite. We will add in places that we think it's missing. And I do separate both of them because later on we can also control them a little bit even more. We can, and we are not depending on one layer for both of those things, but in theory I could do both. I don't have to paint only with one color on the paint layer. Okay, so this is it for today. No, yeah, it has to be. It's basically we are creating this cage, if you remember from the video. But even if not, the video is online. It's creating a cage. So if your high poly model is not inside of this cage, it will not bake. So basically, we will see it. I think tomorrow. We will see how to kind of prepare the model, but the model is following very, very closely, the low and the high, very closely to each other. So we don't, it depends on our work. If the work is only painting and textures, like texture files, stuff like this, we do not need, and that's why we didn't bake until today. If we want to start to use the generators, which is a smart way of Substance to detect your edges, your cavities, the thickness, stuff like this. So if we want to use this option, then we have to bake. Now usually we use it because this is what makes it Substance more robust, that we have the options. But again, if all you want is to bring some high poly model and just to paint it very nice, then you don't need to bake probably at all.
Yishai, about the baking, you can hear me? Or?
No, we cannot hear.
Yeah. Sorry, so about the baking, this is also a lot, the normals are important for mobile and AR, of course. So I think this would be, because the models that you will have, we will have to do all the bakings with it. Even if you paint them, and the thing is then you have a very high poly model, and so for example, yes, for models you can work just with painting it, but then if you would want to have it on an AR app or this, it should be done with the system. It is.
Okay, so I'll just show it again. So this is our baking windows, and we are usually on the common. We were only on the common all this time, and we did everything that we went through. So this is our feed. This is where we get the details from. This is the samplings, and this we set frontal and back rear. Now, here in the selection, you can see we have the option bake selected textures. So we need to go to the selection, and here we get very similar list as we have up in our program. So this is the texture set, and we can decide what we want to bake and what not. Now if we decide for those two and we'll do bake selected, we'll get both of them. If we will decide bake cylinder, it will be only the texture layer that we actually selected. So the navigation, we already repeat, it's Alt with the mouse buttons. Now if you select Shift and right click, and then you just move the mouse, you can get the environment is moving around, and then you can get more feeling how your texture looks like, especially when it's just a plane. It makes it a bit more tricky.